Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of our little D&D podcast. After our previous episodes talk on just possible improvements for a 5.5e or a 5e advance, we briefly touched on on character creation in 5e and its many different facets and controversies. It's certainly quite a well-debated subject in the fan base, so I was wondering if we could throw in our 2 cents. So, to start things off, would anyone just like to give a general opinion on the character creation system in 5e to get a conversation going?
Sure. 5e character creation compared to all the other editions is like just the general nature of 5e really, really streamlined. So when you have a character that you want to create in 5e, there are a lot less customization options with 5e that you might not have, or that you would be able to have in another edition like 3.5, which is hailed for its character options and stuff. So I kind of miss the older ways of having longer to create and more thoughtful characters rather than simple characters that don't require a lot of thought, or they don't have a lot of personality or depth or real thought put into them.
I can see your point there, where you're talking about with there being not as many just sheer options and complexity of character creation. But I say the lack of complexity leaves a lot of room for you to be very creative. Like in many older editions of D&D, often certain races would be locked off from other traits just for being of that race. Like way back in 2E, where if you got to 18 strength, you can pick a feat of strength unless you were a halfling. Or how in many editions like 3.5 and I'm near positive 4E, you would get negative stats if you picked certain races. I think 5E not having anything like that, having races and classes only provide benefits, leaves you a lot more options. You can make many things that, well, sure, might not make complete sense in the context of D&D, you would just simply never be able to do outside of it. Like if you want to make a half-orc wizard, normally the game would heavily punish you for that, but now you have that option available. Or maybe you want to make a halfling barbarian. Again, normally the game would heavily punish you for that, but now that option is available. It might not really fit in the standard fantasy setting, but I think it actually allows for a lot more creativity that brings D&D beyond the standard fantasy setting.
I think
I'd agree with that.
I agree.
I call simplicity a positive more than negative.
I
do like something about min-maxing though, and you can even write it into your story. So if orcs are naturally stupid and you choose to become a wizard, it makes sense in the game that you would not become a wizard, but you can make it into your story of the characters, like how your whole life, nobody thought you would ever become a wizard and how stupid you were and shit like that, and then your stats would be able to reflect that, and naturally you wouldn't
cut out
be as good of a wizard, but I feel like it's still going to add more. It doesn't take away from as much creativity. It kind of puts it in other areas.
Michael, you cut out. I agree a lot with Connor. I just feel like, and I agree to some extent with Michael. I think I think it depends on the trait. I think physical traits make sense. It's a lot harder for a dwarf or say a Goliath. It's a lot harder for a Goliath to be dexterous. However, I feel like mental things like intelligence and stuff are a lot more easily, those can be changed a lot more. They're not as dependent on your race.
So you're saying that physical attributes such as being large is going to make it difficult to squeeze into small places. That's never going to change. But just because you're a half orc doesn't mean you're dumb, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another thing, the thing about I like this the way character creation works in 5e, but it's not perfect, and I think it could definitely use some changes.
How so? What would you change?
Buff Ranger.
That's not a character creation thing, but yes, Buff Ranger. I don't know. I just feel like we've talked about this before. I feel like some races are just kind of broken, but again, that's not really a character creation thing. I feel like there aren't a ton of options, especially when you first make a character. There's like, you have your background, you have your race, and you have your class. You can do a decent amount with those, but you don't always have that many options.
Andrew, you're much more familiar with other editions. Did they expand beyond that 3 of race, class, and background?
Well, the very first thing that comes to mind, of course, would be Feats, which is something that is a huge part of editions like 3.5, where you have several feats at your disposal that you can use and utilize. And I think that's another one of the parts of 3.5 that makes the game or the character creation interesting, is because of all of the different customizations you can do with the feats that they have there.
I suppose, yeah, the only race that really can get a feat at level 1 is a variant human, and it comes with a lot of downsides. That being, you have the fewest stat increases out of any other race. So
compared to the most from regular human.
Yeah. So that is kind of interesting. I guess feats can certainly be a big modifier. So you'd think like maybe everyone at first level should have that variant human ability to pick a feat.
I think if they were to overhaul feats to be less powerful, like slightly less powerful, they would do well to add something like 3.5 where every 4 levels you would actually be able to pick a feat. And if you were a fighter, I believe every 2 levels you were able to pick a feat.
Yeah, I guess that's true. If everyone at first level could pick up Lucky or Magic Initiate, that'd be pretty crazy.
I feel like we need more feats for that to be a thing, though.
I feel okay.
Not because like right now there's only like 9 viable feats or 9 good ones.
I'd like to.
Really depends.
I don't know. It seems like when I've like looked at the feats and like they're all right, but I feel like for us to like for D&D to incorporate a lot to guarantee feats at like every 4th level or something, it would need more feats, and I feel like they would have to tone back the power of some and buff the others.
I'm going to whip out my old 3.5 player handbook and give an example of how powerful these feats are.
If I'm correct, a lot of them are literally just gain proficiency in a skill, which there used to be a lot more of in 3.5, and +1 to a stat.
They had a lot of those for sure.
Yeah, I never really liked those.
I'd like to make a point that I'd like to make a point that I am stealing from some other person. But not 4E, 5E seems to have a lot less like maybe not less feats, maybe it has more feats, I don't remember, but there's not a lot of variety between the feats. Like there are a lot of feats that kind of do the same things, but they're just like slightly different. For instance, like Great Weapon Master versus Sharpshooter versus
lightly armored, medium armored, heavily armored.
Yeah, it's like
my favorite.
Like there's a lot of feats that do very similar things, but just slightly different.
I suppose. I guess that's why I've always preferred the more unique feats out there. Like again, Lucky, Magic Initiate, Tavern Brawler, Elemental Adept, stuff like that. The racial feats too.
I would also like to see like some stuff where you could gain feats from like actually just playing the game. I don't know if that would like balance out or not. So like maybe if like in your game you ended up being incredibly lucky or something, or you always rolled well for some reason, and then your DM kind of recognizes this and it's like, wow, you gained a lucky feat. Or like you're going through a dungeon, right? And you end up like doing something really cool. You would gain a feat for that. And it wouldn't be very often, of course, because, balance. But at the same time, I feel like, because people could just kind of pick feats. It's like, oh, you're lucky. People's like, why are you lucky? And it doesn't make any sense.
I see where you're coming from here, but I feel like those benefits can be handed out on their own. Like if someone accomplishes well, if someone accomplishes something unique, they could get certainly a reward for that, yeah, like a permanent buff, but maybe it's not really what feats are for. I see what you're talking about, but hanging stuff like that out for free would be really hard to balance.
I feel like
or maybe like characters would have to write a reason in their backstory why they have the particular feat. Right now, I don't see like I'm more curious on like why people use use the feat, and I feel like people kind of just choose them because, well,
Well,
they're good.
that's true. I feel like that's less of a character creation thing though, and more of a DM thing. Because like,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of DMs do that. Like, oh, you have this feat. Why do you have this feat? What's special? Like, what you can't just say you have this feat. You have to tell me why you have this feat. And then some
Or-
don't do that. And so I feel like it's a lot less of a actual game thing and more just the DM.
I think the DMs are the most important, more arguably the number one aspect in the game. So they should probably have they're definitely a part of character creation.
Oh, I agree with
All
you.
the stuff that involves the
Absolutely.
player.
Absolutely. Just
So that just brings up the point of characters for their stats and their abilities versus characters for their personality. Like Magic
Mm.
Initiate, it's a very good feat, right?
Killer, yeah.
What would make a barbarian take Magic Initiate? Probably not a lot. For a stereotypical barbarian, I was born in the wild kind of thing. Nothing is really there for them to say, I want to. Where have I learned this magic from?
Maybe a connection with nature could cause them to take Magic Initiate for the Druid class. Maybe they were born with some latent magic powers, very
Maybe
faint, but
what
still
if we
there,
had
hence
what if
sorcerer.
we had class specific feats? Like each class had 10 like specific feats that they could take.
I wouldn't say 10, that's a lot, but that'd be interesting because they're
Or,
racial
and
feats.
yet like you'd have like there are a bunch of like everyone feats that everyone can take, but what if there were like for like 10 different feats per class? So if like you're a paladin, you could take the I don't know, good learner or something when you're in fucking like religious class or something. And you gain like a +1 to intelligence, and maybe you had proficiency in some intelligence stuff.
Okay. So I can see your point there of like class-specific feats. I mean, we do already have race-specific feats, and they are pretty well received. But I feel like we already kind of touched on something similar to that in our 5e Advance with like Unearthed Arcana having like 2 choices for every level up ability. That's kind of what this sounds like. Like just extra choices when you level.
Yeah, but like, I still like that idea though, and it does make a lot of sense.
Me too. I'll give you that.
Because, like,
They
if
might
you're
have
with-
some feats that are class specific, just like they have race specific feats.
I feel like it would just add
I
more
do not believe so.
customization.
What was that, Connor?
What?
You said something?
Yeah, I said I didn't. Andrew said they might have some class-specific feats. I do not think they do right now.
No, I'm saying they might. I think he meant like they might, as in they might add them, not they currently do.
Oh, okay. I see your point there. Sorry, I misheard.
They do have race specific feats already for like Xanathar's Guide stuff.
Yeah, and Xanathars.
There's a lot of Unearthed Arcana race specifics too. Of course, that's not actual game, but like still, some
Right.
of them are kind of balanced.
I have a couple 3.5e feats here. If we'd like to compare and contrast the feats between the editions.
Sure thing.
Let's see. Athletic. You have a knack for athletic endeavors. Benefit. You get a +2 bonus on all climb checks and swim checks. Like 3.5 has got 5 billion different
Yeah,
abilities
yeah.
that you can use. You've got appraise, balance buff, climb, craft, 3 different crafts. You've got so many things.
Wait, you have 3 different
So
crafts?
a +2 bonus on all climb checks and swim checks. That's not a whole lot for you.
That sounds very situational. Yeah,
But that's
that's the
Oh,
entire.
I'm sorry. All of these feats are something along that level. Agile. You are particularly flexible and poised. You get a +2 bonus on all balance checks and escape artist checks. Like, do you see how situational those are?
Yeah, I can see
That's
it.
why you get them every few levels.
And I can see that, but I think those feats just sound kind of bland, for lack of a better word. Like it's just like a small bonus to very specific checks. I think 5e can still have like those situational feats, but I think they're a lot more interesting and a lot more noticeable in their strength. Like there's actor where you can mimic someone else's speech. There's charger where it basically gives you a +5 bonus to attack damage if you charge at someone 10 feet away from you. There again, magic initiate, lucky, elemental adept,
Well, it's like
grappler, things like that. Very unique but still powerful feats.
I feel like
Well, it's like what do you want the power level of feats to be? Do you want them to be very powerful, make a big impact, or are you trying to make it more of a flavor thing, like in 3.5e? And you can't really have both at the same time because
Yeah.
people are just gonna pick the more powerful ones. So
I
you kind of
feel-
have to have them be all around the same power level, or else it's just pointless to have the worst ones.
I feel like
I see your point.
I feel like
think
it-
feats. Oh, sorry.
Stand still.
I think feats would be best suited. I think as they are in 5e, situational but still very powerful.
I agree.
I think
Mm,
we should, in general, I think we should back away from doing things just for the sake of having high numbers and move more towards doing things because your character really would do it. And I feel like having overpowered feats steps away from the idea of choosing something because your character would actually do it and steps more towards the I want to roll high numbers.
I do kind of see your point, like how those kinds of feats play in the power gaming a bit. But again, I feel like some of them are get so hyper specific that's kind of counteracted. Like you aren't going to see any power gamers take the actor feat. You aren't going to see any of them really bother with the elemental adept feat. When more than likely they're probably going to take the +2 to a stat or +1 to 2 different stats.
But that's the thing, Connor, is there really shouldn't be feats that are just you would never take the other feat because this one's just a better choice all around.
I agree with you there, but again, it's like I think they're better when they each work towards their own situation. Like obviously, if multiple feats try to take on the same situation, inevitably
One's gonna be better and
something's
doesn't
gonna
matter.
fall flat. Yeah,
I feel
One's
like
gonna stand up
I feel
above
like
the
the
rest.
thing about with 3.5 versus 5e feats is 3.5 feats tend to be a lot more situational, but a lot less unique.
Powerful.
Well, not yeah, that's true too, but like more just a lot less unique. Like it's just stat bonuses, which are different. The thing about the stat bonuses is you were saying earlier how they're kind of bland just because they're stat bonuses, but the thing about that is in 3.5 there's so many stat bonuses that's not always bland because there's so many. In 5e, a stat bonus is just there's like 12 stats. Like it's not that much.
I mean,
Not to forget that in 3.5, you could stack all the points that your character has when you're making your character to be really unique by choosing to be an expert in one specific thing. Like you could put your points into one small area and you could become a god at that as early as you want to be. For example, I played in a campaign, a lower, like, tier 2 campaign, I think, where somebody put all of their points into diplomacy, and they had a massive bonus in diplomacy from the very beginning. And that creates really interesting characters who are really good at one specific thing. And then you can have a well-rounded party of the classic, the physical guy, the face, the brains, and all of those different things. Everybody has their own unique role when you have character creation in that way.
I see your point, but that's kind of sounds like what you were talking about earlier, just wanting to roll high numbers.
Well, it depends. When you're creating a character, it's kind of all up. It's easier to power game when you create a character and say, I want my character to be really good at diplomacy, right? Like, if that's his thing, you can power game really good diplomacy as long as you stay consistent with that.
Yeah.
And if you're like power gaming diplomacy, then you're neglecting a lot of other stuff that you could be doing.
Yeah, that's
it's not like overpowered or making your character a shit ton better.
Yeah, that's the thing with because in 5e, when you take one stat and max it out, that is one of 6 stats and it impacts like half of everything. For instance, if I'm a warlock or a sorcerer and I take max charisma and just dump everything into charisma, I'm gonna be a very strong character because that's my damage, that's my like anything roleplay wise it's really good. Whereas in 3.5, if you stack a very specific thing that's it's kind of more situational and you can still be short in a lot of other areas that it doesn't make it super stupid overpowered.
I consider it much less as power gaming in 3.5 when you're doing stat maximization and a lot more based on unique character stuff because of how niche everything is.
Like
All right.
you can't really because in 5e, Dex is everything. If you're a rogue, it's your damage, it's your attack, it's your initiative, it's your AC, it's everything. If you max out Dex in 5e, that's really, really good, especially as a rogue. However, if you maxed out, like, you can't necessarily max out Dex, I guess, in 3. I don't know much about 3.5, but I'd assume, like, you'd max out one specific part of Dex. You'd either max out, like, acrobatics, or I don't know what the stats are in 3.5, but you get my point. It's not just maxing out Dex, it's maxing out specific parts of Dex. So it's not just you're good at all dexterity things, you're good at a very specific part of the dexterity. I could just be wrong, because I don't know 3.5.
Is that correct,
Kind
Andrew? Is that about right?
It's a lot easier in 5e to max out a large range of things versus 3.5 when it's much easier to max out one specific thing, like forgery. Forgery is a skill in 3.5. Do you know how specific forgery is? You can be a god at it if you want to, but like it's forgery. When are you going to use that?
When you
It's
forge.
mostly it's role play.
I assume by forging you mean like faking documents, right? Not like building weapons.
Yes, as in
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
or
Then
open lock. Open lock is a skill.
lockpicking is its own skill.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess you
Search, sense motive, sleight of hand, spellcraft, spot.
Spot.
That's a cool one. Use rope.
Like-
Use rope.
Use rope. Yo, dude, I may be bad at fighting and every other thing, but man, can I use that rope?
we know how to rope.
I feel like the way 3.5 handles it just makes it more about roleplay than it is presented in 5th edition.
Because everything's so specific that it's like, well, you may be min-maxing this one thing, but that one thing's not going to make you overpowered, so it's okay.
Okay, I can see your point. I still think, though, I still quite like the feats in 5e that are much more like give you almost like a unique ability as opposed to just making one of your skills slightly better.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think in 3. I think in 5e that fits more. I think in 3.5 it's okay to have those stats, but like in 5e it doesn't. It's a lot. Like I just think it works in 3.5. Like in 5e I don't think it works as much, and I agree with you there.
All right. Now, though, on the topic of focusing on topic of making your character good versus making him like have an actual personality, like power gaming versus role playing, that brings us to a pretty interesting topic of multi-classing and how strong it is in 5e. Now, a lot of people are doing it because it's just crazy good, despite how it might not make much roleplay sense.
I think players that multi-class because wow, it's really good without any reason or other than it's just good, aren't really playing the game how it should be played. So, sure, it's really good, but like personally, I don't like to multi-class because I feel like it detracts from the character itself. Like, I don't think I'd ever really have more than 2 classes on a character if I ever choose to do that. So, I feel like the people who do that kind of undermine the whole point, which is to roleplay.
I agree a lot. For instance, I'm in Arthur's campaign. I play a warlock, and my warlock is very gambles a lot, and he does a lot of kind of roguish stuff. And early in game, I really did think about multiclassing into rogue, but that's the thing. I thought of multiclassing to rogue not because I thought, wow, that'd be good, but because I thought that would make a lot of sense character-wise. And I think that's how multiclassing should be taken. A lot less like, oh, it's powerful, and a lot more like it makes a lot of sense for my character.
I can see that there. Like, there are plenty of ways you can give like roleplay reasons for multiclassing. Like, I'll just get my opinion out of the way right now. I actually love multiclassing. It's one of my favorite parts of 5e, getting to mix and match all different kinds of classes to make some really interesting combinations. I feel like combining two classes, you can make some really interesting things. Like if you want to go for like one of my favorite characters I made recently was like it was like a dwarf who was not only like really strong, but also like basic. He was kind of like he's a barbarian from a very nature centric tribe who are all about hunting, like communing with nature, but more also seeing as a competition. So
Well,
I could make a combo barbarian druid, and not only would I get some really cool unique ability combinations, I could also get some really interesting role play options. Again, it's like you can do some like really interesting things with classes that you normally never could before, thanks to multi-classing. A few
well,
Hexblade Warlock or Paladin can make a good melee sorcerer. A few levels of Rogue could suddenly make your DPS dealer a lot more effective, making some interesting backstory, maybe a criminal past.
I'm going to hard disagree with you. I think multi-classing in a small respect is good. Like if the wizard really was learning from his fighter friend and wanted to learn a little bit about the sword, that roleplay wise, great. That makes sense. That's cool. But I feel like the Dungeons and Dragons character build meta has turned into picking things again to power game. And if you I enjoy the aspect of kind of unique combinations, but some of them just don't really make sense unless it's a stretch. So, as much as I want to see a monk one, barbarian one, druid one, sorcerer one, wizard one, paladin one, I I I don't want to see that. Honestly, it doesn't make sense. I don't know what classes I just said. But I'm assuming it's probably not even that unviable. But if you go to like a circus, right? It's really cool to see those half man, half women people, on the display, like the freaks of nature or whatever.
Keep going. Want to see where this goes?
That's cool to look at, but does it make sense? No. Is it something that like I want to see in every single campaign? Hell no. I'm not interested in that. It doesn't usually make sense.
So you see, multi-class is more of a novelty than an actual like part of the game.
I am firmly against multiclassing. More than a little bit. Like if you multiclass into two different classes, you're power gaming. Don't even give me anything.
Really?
I feel like it should be allowed to multi-class like once, but it shouldn't be some like easy process and be like, oh look, I leveled up. No, I feel like it should be something that's like you'd have to work through for a multitude of levels to get one level in another class. Like, for example, the wizard, right? Like it would take a long ass time to be a wizard and then learn how to be a fighter. Like it'd take a while. So I feel like you're as a DM, I guess, because I feel like the DM's in control of all of this. It would take you would have to make your players like wait a long time and actually earn their level, I guess.
I feel like
The
multi-classing
game already kind of addresses this though. There are stat requirements for multi-classing.
that's
Like let's look at that wizard fighter example. If you wanted to actually become a fighter, you would need 13 strength or dexterity, something a lot of wizards aren't going to have. So they're actually going to have to spend time building up their stats so they can actually have the requirements to actually start multiclassing.
I'd agree with you.
And again, every class has this. You have to get a 13 and 1 or 2 stats that are central to that class. So if you want to make like real opposite classes go together, you do actually have to put some work into it.
I propose a solution.
What is
No
the
more
solution?
Multiclassing, except when you multiclass, let's say wizard wants to become a fighter, instead of taking level 1 fighter, you take an entirely different level of fighter that's like somewhere between level 0 and 1. And so every time you multiclass, it's like that level except toned down.
That's kind of what they do
I mean,
for
that's already
certain.
kind of the case because you don't get proficiencies.
Yeah, that's kind of the case already with certain classes. For instance, I recently, as a meme, I haven't played it, but I have a character that's a multi-class between a bard, a sorcerer, a warlock, and a cleric.
Paladin, I think.
Paladin, all the charisma casters, because I thought it would be funny. And while most of the time I was able to just take them all, there are certain downsides. For instance, spellcasting is heckin' confusing. Like, Warlock's the only one that really stays with this class. Everyone else, it's like, you have a limited number of spell slots depending on what classes you have and what level of each class. And then you know all the spells, like, as if you were, like, that. Say I'm a Paladin 1, Sorcerer 1. I'd have all the okay, not Paladin, I guess. Warlock 1, Sorcerer 1. That still doesn't work. Bard 1, Sorcerer 1. There we go. I get all my Bard spells, I get all the Sorcerer spells, but I only get... Like, I don't get twice as many spell slots. I still have the same amount of spell slots.
So yeah, your wish is kind of already granted, Andrew. There are already limits to the class when you multi-class.
However...
But
I do agree with Andrew.
It's still so prevalent, and it's still so overpowered. You can't sit here and tell me that multi-classing isn't pretty much the only thing that's viable. A level 20 character versus a level 15-5 character doesn't even compare. Usually.
Here's the thing.
I think they would need to make it so that multi-classing is less viable.
I think...
Because it's already completely overpowered. The game is heavily stacked towards multi-classing, which should become... realistically, it's an irregular thing.
So, here's the thing. I think, currently with how they have... You're right, Connor, they do have limits, but other than spellcasting, it's not that big of a limit. A 13 in another stat, that's not hard. Most of my characters usually have, like, most of their stats are 12. Like, at least 2 of them are at over 13, sometimes 3. Point buy, I don't know how it works, because I don't know if I've ever used point buy. So I don't know if it's a lot harder.
If you use standard array, you can get 3 stats above 13.
Exactly. Okay, yeah, see, exactly. I feel like that's... So like, there's a limit? Stats. No, I feel like they should be buffing how much you need. I think you should need, like, a 14 or a 15, because 13s aren't hard to get. You can have a character with, like... If you, not by point buy, of course, but if you roll, you could debatably have a legit character that just have all 13s. It'd be stupid and we shouldn't allow it.
Average? Isn't 13 above average?
13 is above average, but it's barely above average. Like,
it's actually well above average when it's considered average.
Well, consider for rolling, it's not, though. Like, if you go by rolling or, like, maybe by point buy, I'm not sure, it's not. Like, lore-wise, it's well above average, but actually, when you actually get stats, it's really not. It's a little bit above average, but not enough that I think it's viable, because you're right, Art. Because, Andrew, that is the thing. The only really downside is the spellcasting, because spellcasting, the only... Because, like, some classes count as, like, half casters, so, they only get, like, half as much spell slot. It's really weird. I'm pretty sure the character I'd mentioned earlier, where it's, like, a level 1 in each of the charisma casters, has, like, 3 spell slots, even though I'm a level 4. So, like, but that's the only thing. It's literally just spellcasters. If you multi-class like a fighter and a rogue, there's no downsides.
In second edition, in order to... I know this is about subclasses and not multi-classes, but in second edition, in order to be in a specific subclass, like the ranger subclass, for example, you needed like a 17 in dexterity or something. You needed something almost insane. I feel like that would be better than a 13.
Well, which is why I think we should go with like a 15.
I have the
20.
Take
it or leave it.
25. All right, settled.
You should literally have fucking. Sorry, you should literally have what's the most powerful boss in the game?
Boss?
BBG. It like reflects stuff. Jonah,
are you talking about Tarrasque? You're talking about Tarrasque?
Yes, that's Tarrasque.
Oh, okay.
And you should have to have Tarrasque levels of strength in order to become a fighter.
30.
Yes.
This is fine. This is what we need.
Yeah, I have I actually have the 2E book open right now, and it looks like, for the Ranger class specifically, you need a 13 in Strength and Dex and a 14 in Constitution and Wisdom to start becoming a Ranger. Paladin, you need a 12 in Strength, 9 in Con, 13 in Wisdom, and 17 in Charisma.
See, like that.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of. The Paladin with the 17 Charisma.
See, that makes a lot more sense, though.
Crazy.
See, that's what makes a lot more sense. Either have either have a lot more stats that are lower or have the one stat that you need be a lot higher than a 13.
I can see your point. Maybe
It's significantly too easy to
They're-
become.
They're on the
I think,
right
I think
track,
Connor's
but they need to
example's
do it
too hard
more.
though. I think Connor's example is too much though, because at that point I feel like if you need 4 different stats to be something, I feel like you're limiting creativity.
No, that's what I'm saying though. I think it should just
Ranger
be.
kind of is.
I think it should just be 1 or 2 stats that's just higher. Because currently,
Yeah.
I think they're on the right track with limiting what you limiting how high. Like you need to have a certain amount in a stat to get it. I just feel like it's a too low of a bar so far. I think they need to raise the bar to be able to multi-class.
I mean, some of them do have requirements of 2 different stats. For example,
But again, Connor, it's not even hard. Like again, I have a level 4 character currently that's multi-classed at 4 different things, and I was able to do all of them. Like it shouldn't be that easy.
I suppose I can see your reasoning. I guess one way this could be addressed is because the thing is, I know it's personal, but I've always loved multi-class, and I think I shouldn't have such massive limits on it. So, what I could propose is, and again, this was kind of brought up earlier. Maybe you have to have some kind of solid story reason, like in campaign. You have a very good reason to multi-class.
I agree with you,
Like-
Connor. Oh, sorry. Continue. If you're
One example I saw is actually from a campaign I've been watching where a DMPC who was originally all barbarian was after a while of hanging out with that group's party, slowly but surely began to take on the teachings of the monk of the group. And after a while, and a very good roll or persuasion roll from that monk, she then decided she was going to accept monk teachings, and basically from now on was going to level monk instead of barbarian. I think that's great.
I think that's cool.
A very solid story reason. So something like that. Like if you want to level up, you have to actively search for a deity and make a pact for it. Sorcerer, you actually have to look into your bloodline to see if there actually is some kind of magic blood. Wizard, you have to do loads of studying. I mean, maybe not that extreme, but like you have to put in considerable effort to like start leveling in the class.
Can I say something really quick? Because I just saw something. First of all, I agree with you almost 100%, Connor. That'd be interesting to implement in the game. I feel like that's kind of more of a DM thing, just because though I do agree with you a lot. I do still feel like because you mentioned sorcerer. Now that I think about it, I do think there are certain classes that you should not be able to multi-class into unless you started there. You don't just suddenly become magical. Like, oh shoot, I have magical parents and magical. That's not how it works. You're a sorcerer. You're not. You don't just. Yes, I am a sorcerer. I was the whole time. Don't question it.
We've all read many stories of the chosen one with hidden magic powers. I mean,
yeah, but like I feel like it shouldn't take that long.
Everybody's a chosen one then, because everybody wants to multi-class and destroy. It just becomes a big deal, and it takes away from the uncommon tropes that should show up interestingly every once in a while.
Like,
in 3.5e, as a paladin, if you multi-classed into another class, you could never take another level of paladin.
I kind of like that in
I
certain
feel like
aspects.
I do like that. I feel like
that I like that as a
you can make the switch, but I don't think you should be able to go back.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that a lot. Like for instance, Connor's whole story there with like the barbarian that turned into a monk later, that would fix that. I mean, there was already kind of what was happening, but like you shouldn't be able to. I'm a rogue. No, I'm a wizard. Actually, I kind of want to be a rogue again. Wizard's cool. Like doesn't.
Like limited study, like for that, like let's say like your studies aren't as obviously you're getting much more experience doing your rogue stuff than you are doing wizard stuff.
But you shouldn't be able to do both at once, is what I'm saying. Like you can multi-class because like, oh, maybe I trained a long time as a rogue, but now I want to become a wizard. But you shouldn't just still be leveling up in rogue because you're doing wizard stuff now and you're trying to be a wizard. You're not really. You may still be good at your rogue stuff, but you're not trying to learn new things with your rogue stuff. You're trying to become a wizard. You know my point?
I can see your point, but let me give a different example. Let's say, for instance, another class like maybe a paladin or a sorcerer takes a pact as a warlock. Maybe if they maybe initially they only gain like 1 level. and the moment they go through their game, leveling up as like paladin or sorcerer. And if they continue to serve their deity well, maybe it's like one level up, it's like, you've done very well. Here's another level of warlock. And then later they continue on leveling up more, and then it's like, all right, you continue to do very well. As a reward, here's a third level of warlock. Something like that. Like as a reward, you get a level in a different class.
I agree with you there because that's an interesting story concept. The one issue I have with that is it's very specific, and it only really works with warlock.
What about warlock paladin? When, as a paladin, you know you've got a close relationship with your god. How is your god gonna feel when you're making a pact with some patron?
That is obviously the massive risk. Yeah, and that could be a really interesting roleplay opportunity. Are you doing this secretly? Is the patron like, does it have a close connection with your god? Like maybe you're a paladin of tier, but you're also working with, say, like an angel who maybe works under tier?
Here's the thing. I feel like we've gotten into the point where we're talking more about backstory and lore stuff, and the problem with that is I feel like it entirely depends on the character, on the DM, and on the story. Because all of this is correct, but this isn't really dependent on the rules. This is just what makes sense. And I feel like that's kind of the thing about 3.5 is I feel like it really is ultimately up to the DM and the player. If it makes sense, then go with it. If it doesn't make sense, then you shouldn't be doing it. Because a lot of that stuff, you're right. Some of it makes sense story-wise, but depending on how you do it, some of it doesn't make sense. And I feel like if it doesn't make sense, it shouldn't be allowed. But okay. I feel like it'd be hard to implement a rule that would ultimately fix everything, because I don't think there's one rule that would really apply to every single story.
But you ban multi-classing. Easy game.
My
problem
favorite.
Solved. No more problem.
As much as I dislike multi-classing, like, you can do it, just like do it a little bit. Don't make it your thing to be a multi-classer. Don't multi-class in every campaign. Don't.
I agree with Einstein 100% on that one.
I like it old school. I like it when there are 4 races and 5 classes. You know, I hate UA. I have really unpopular opinions. Down with 5th edition, you know. But like, for real, just be normal for once, please.
Why can't you just be normal? No, I agree with.
This seems like an excellent segue to go into UA. Let's discuss.
I think we discussed UA last time.
Spend the next hour talking about Unearthed Arcana. Does that sound fun?
Anyway, I actually agree a lot with like, I don't have a lot of the same points as like a lot of the same views. Sorry, not points as Andrew, but I kind of agree in that sense. Like, multi-classing's cool, but it shouldn't be a thing you do every single time. You should do it when it makes sense or when it feels right. You shouldn't just, I'm going to multi-class every single time, because why would I not? Because then you're just multi-classing to multi-class. It's not actually a story thing. You shouldn't make a story reason to multi-class. You should multi-class because you have a story reason.
People who played D&D for the combat are interesting creatures.
I can agree with you there. I mean, thing is though, I understand like multi-classing is associated with like power gaming and such, but I still love multi-classing more, again, for its roleplay opportunities, and again, the unique combinations you can make. It basically squares the number of, in a way, it like squares the number of classes you have in the game. Or cubes if you want to really go nuts, or even further than that. I just don't think it's a bad thing. I genuinely think it's a great feature in 5e that allows for that one very crucial aspect of 5e, customization and uniqueness in your characters.
I think you can accomplish that without the multi-classing part.
But as well?
I'm sorry, I was gone for a second. What's going
on? I'm saying multi-classing is very important for the uniqueness of how 5e allows you to make very unique characters.
I think it's important, but I don't think it's required. Like, it's cool, and I think it should be kept in, but I don't think you have to do it each time. And I think, again, back to my other point, it should not be you should not make a part of your backstory to multiclass. It should be you make a part of your you have a part of your backstory and you realize, oh wait, that makes a lot of sense to multiclass with that. It shouldn't be you shouldn't do it to multiclass, you should do it for the story.
I can agree with you, yeah. When I multiclass, it's usually because like, ooh, this would be a fun character versus ooh, this would be a good character.
If like as a DM, I would rather my characters, my players not multiclass and all of that stuff. But I feel like it's become so ingrained in the culture of character creation that if I were to say, "Hey guys, no multiclassing, no, you know, to limit my players like that," they would become extremely unhappy.
I personally, if my DMs have said like, "Hey, you can't multiclass," I basically react the same way I always do whenever a DM like limits character creation options, where it's like, I'll deal with it, but I'm not super excited about it.
I feel like 5e should just be sorry. I feel like yeah, you might not like it or whatever, but I feel like a DM, like, unless it makes sense, like, oh, you can't have this race because this race just doesn't exist in my world or something, or like, oh, they're all extinct or they're super rare, so we're not going to allow it. That makes sense. But saying I don't want multiclassing because I don't like multiclassing.
If it makes sense and it ain't broken, allow it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not to say that no multiclassing. I'm to say, if you come up to me with a hey, I want a multiclass because I want a multiclass, I will shoot you down. I don't want that.
And I like that. I'm okay with that because like that does make a lot of sense. Like coming up and being like, I'm gonna multiclass. Why? I just feel like it. Multiclass. Like you just no. You should have a character concept and be like, well, this character feels like a rogue but also like a sorcerer, so I'm gonna multiclass into both. Like that makes sense. But just saying, I want to multiclass into a rogue and a sorcerer, so I'm going to make a character to reflect that. That should not be a thing.
Character first, stats second.
Yes, exactly.
That actually...
If you find a group of people who want to min-max and who want to power game, that's fine. I feel like power gamers should go into clumps of each other. But if you're half power gaming, half role playing, none of the players are going to be happy.
Inevitably, like there's always those games where it's like just one power gamer who wants to have all the attention, and that just spirals everything out of control. Or worse, when there's two power gamers constantly trying to one up each other, and then just the other players just feel like they're being shoved to the side.
Yeah. Like
power gamers should stick with power gamers, and role players should stick with role players, because that's just how they work.
There are. Yeah, in the same way, there are wargaming DMs who are more than happy to accept power gamers.
Yeah, I've read stories where like the campaign's literally like it's essentially just, hey, we're a party, but we're heckin' murdering each other. It's okay, and that works in that environment if everyone understands that and everyone's okay with that and everyone wants to do that. That works.
Player on player infighting is not fun. Character on character infighting, sure, whatever. But player on player infighting, which would happen if a heavy RPer met a power gamer, that's no bueno.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah.
Which is why I think we should allow Unearthed Arcana.
Fuck you.
Thanks for joining.
If it ain't broke and it adds to your character, then why not?
If it ain't broke, they'll fix it. If it's still broke, ignore it.
Yeah, like for example, the revised ranger that Arthur sent me. It's not broken, but it adds a lot to the class. So why would you not use it?
I think character fixes are like for Unearthed Arcana. That's fine. If you want a revised ranger, that's cool. But if you come to me with your stupid ass alien subrace that makes no sense, I don't want it in my world. Honestly,
I think that's just more of a thing against homebrew. Because Unearthed Arcana doesn't really have. Yeah, you're gonna need homebrew as a DM because for me, example, I had to design monsters and I had to I had ideas and I was wondering what monsters.
Okay, homebrewing monsters is one thing.
So
yeah,
homebrewing characters, I hate it. I absolutely despise it.
Also, I don't think Andrew was talking about a DM making their own monsters or races and such. That's
Yeah.
fine. I think he's talking about taking other people's races and classes and such.
Well, I think there's a difference between homebrew and Unearthed Arcana in particular. And technically, the Ranger isn't Unearthed Arcana. It's homebrew. It's from a Reddit page. So I feel like as long as it adds to your character and it's not really broken and it makes sense in the world, i.e., the revised Ranger or some of the subclasses for Paladin, the Unearthed Arcana subclasses for Paladin. And some of them are really powerful, so they really shouldn't be allowed, but some of them aren't. So, it makes sense to allow those to, add and expand to the amazing character creation that we currently are experiencing.
Hey, guys, really quick. I only have apparently I only have like 25 minutes. So
Cut it out. Cut it out.
In that case,
oh yeah,
in
cut
that case,
out.
we've been on to a point Andrew brought up that I think should be really important to talk about. If we're talking about like a character's number, a character's stats versus the actual roleplay, how about the one system that gives roleplay numbers, that gives roleplay stats, aka alignment?
Boo.
Hey!
Boo.
Yay!
Alignment sucks.
Alignment can be fun.
I think alignment's
Wait,
good. It needs revision.
outside of the video.
Yeah.
Either alignment system or point buy versus rolling stats, we could probably talk about for hours. I feel like one of
Yeah.
those should not make the cut and should make their own video.
I feel like alignment would be
I'm
easier
gonna
to
talk
talk
Alignment
about.
would be better as its own video, I think.
Alignment would be better
Yeah.
with its own video. I feel like
I've-
yeah, okay, I agree with you. So maybe go to point buy and XP because I
Okay,
feel like
yeah, point buy
that's
and
I feel like that's simple enough that we could pretty much do that very simply.
Okay,
Alright.
Arthur, let's scrub that last little bit.
Completely.
Point fine. All right then. So on the topic of power gaming characters, one very contentious point that has come up in terms of making stats is which system of determining stats is superior, point buy or rolling. Obviously, this is a very well contested point in the community. So, who would like to start us off here? Who has they'd say a pretty.
I have a
massive
point I
opinion?
could start on, but I
have
feel
a
like
massive
it,
opinion.
I have a massive opinion.
Let's hear it.
okay,
Andrew, you're Mr. Massive, so go.
it's true. I was gonna say
I
like
know
I have
you,
a
but-
I have a point, but I think Andrew should start. So
Go right ahead
Take
then.
it
Andrew.
away.
Either okay, the people who say, well, if you don't like your stats, just do point buy. First off, everyone does point buy or nobody does point buy. That's the only way it works, because otherwise point buy is underpowered. That's the first point. The second point is that somebody's going to feel left out when they're super underpowered using rolling for stats, which is why I propose if you're going to roll for stats, you should be able to all roll for your own stats and then choose from each other's rolls as to which one you want. So, for example, I roll really shitty, right? But Michael rolled decently. I should literally be able to take Michael's stats that he rolled and apply them to myself if I want to,
If
because
that's the
it's
case-
balanced.
If that's the case, you should only be able to roll stats once per player in the party.
And then everybody should choose one or two of those sets that they want to use. But you shouldn't be limited to your own rolls, because somebody's going to get the middle finger and have to deal with it for a year-long campaign.
I agree.
Yeah.
The one thing I say that if you do that, you'd need like a session 0 or something so you can talk about that and choose stats, because like because not everyone makes their characters at the same time if you don't do that. But like I 100% agree. It's probably the best way to do rolling is have everyone roll stats and then choose from whichever of those rolls.
Yeah, I've seen systems like that, but I think honestly I'm kind of with Andrew that I think rolling for stats can be fun, and there are ways to do it well. I think point buy might just be the better system. Like point buy, it's like it guarantees balance. It makes sure everyone is working on an exactly level. And it's very adjustable. Like if you want to make characters a bit stronger in your campaign, add in a few points for point buy. And so instead of 27, you can use like 30 or 32. If you want to make them a bit weaker, lower the points. It's like 24, maybe even like as low as 20. I think that versatility and adjustments makes point buy a very superior system when it comes to rolling. when it goes up against rolling.
That's the thing, though. I feel like I agree with you in some aspects, but I feel like I don't. Here's the thing. I'm in a weird middle ground because I don't think either's superior. I think both have their place in completely different areas. I don't think. I think point buy is good for gay, especially like number crunchy campaigns or like when everyone knows what they want and just kind of wants to have balance. But I think rolling works a lot for people who don't necessarily know exactly what they want to play with and want some randomness in their game and maybe are focusing a lot more into the roleplay aspect and a lot less into the actual murder monsters, death, blood aspect.
I can see that, but there comes again the obvious problem of the one player who gets like crazy good rolls out of nowhere, and the one player who gets constantly screwed over by rolls, and then suddenly just feeling almost inferior for the entire game.
And
like,
that is
a lot of people like playing powerful characters. A lot of people like playing weak characters. But it's never fun when a guy hoping to play a powerful character suddenly gets crap stats and can't use them.
Connor,
or when someone hoping to play a weak character gets like 5/18s.
Okay,
See,
yes.
Connor,
but
the big brain solution to this, when you get the middle finger, is you immediately create your character. You go into the game, immediately find a way to kill yourself, and make an exact copy of that character, but re-roll for the stats.
big brain.
Or
Also,
you could just say the DM can give you stats that he wants. He can say, okay, you guys each get 3 15s and 3 10s. Put them wherever you want. I think it's okay if your DM says, hey, you guys can have these numbers. Don't roll for them. Just take these numbers. I feel like that's a decent system if you want it.
Yeah, here's the thing, Connor. Here's the thing, Connor. Your logic for rolling being kind of bad is only really applies if everyone is rolling their own stats and they're not changed. The thing about rolling is I think it's good, but there are two things you should do. A, you shouldn't have Andrew's idea where everyone has like a pool of stats they can choose from and they can just take what they want. Because I feel like that takes away from one character being unbalanced because everyone gets the same stats, so it doesn't matter. It's okay. And B, I think the DM should be able to change it. If someone rolls ridiculously good, DM can come in and say, no, we're lowering a few of those numbers because that's dumb. If someone rolls ridiculously low, we can say, all right, we're raising some of those because those are unpowered. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying rolling is okay,
then why
but
are you rolling for them?
Well, that's the thing.
When the DM raises a lower stat, if the DM raises a lower stat, it's going to be in the middle ground, and if it's going to be in the middle ground anyways, then why wouldn't you just use point
no,
five
it's okay to... No, that's the thing. It's not like raising and lowering it to the point where it's basically like perfectly balanced. I'm saying like, oh, you rolled 5 18s? No, we're going to give you like 1 18 and lower some of those to like 12s or 10s or whatever. We're not going to... Like, I'm trying to... Also, the thing
it's mostly about lowering than raising.
Yeah, raising is...
But when one guy is really overpowered and one guy's really underpowered, you have to deal with that for however long your campaign is going. If I had 5 8s and an 18 and somebody else had 6 16s, I would be mad as fuck.
Exactly, but that's why I agree with your thing, Andrew, where we could share stats, and then as long as the DM is monitoring it and changing stats where they need to be changed, and everyone has the same pool of stats, I think that's okay. And also,
wait, hear me out here, guys. You just roll a d20, and whatever number it is your stat.
1.
Oh boy.
I like that system.
20, a 2, a 7, a 5, an 18,
a 19,
and a 3. What am I gonna do here?
That would be such a funny campaign.
2 in dexterity. You literally don't have legs.
Yes.
You're paralyzed.
Oh god.
Yes.
So
a dragon appears, but you only have 20 strength and like 2 dex. What will you do?
Your upper body is like massive, but
you literally walk on your hands.
You walk on your hands.
So I think
it's actually brilliant. Oh my god.
So
I would love to do that.
Another point earlier that was brought up, I think, was that, well, if you're doing that, why not just use point buy? But that's the thing. I feel like point buy is like, you have to build it from the ground up. Whereas rolling, it's more like, if you're going to adjust it after you roll, it's kind of like having a baseline. These are your stats. You can change them a bit, but more or less these are going to be your stats.
But why would you do that when you could just, if you're trying to have balanced stats, then just use point buy?
Oh, I agree. If you're going for stats to specifically have balanced stats, to just use point buy, that's stupid. I just don't think every campaign needs to have perfectly balanced stats. Because I mean,
I think perfectly balanced versus like clear difference is a thing. Like if your stats are like a little bit better than mine, do I care? Not really. If your stats are a lot better than mine, I like it's not fun for me.
Exactly.
I've
Yeah,
seen
but if you're
campaigns
gonna
with,
make
like,
them a little bit different, then why would you just take the one extra step and just make them the same, or use them the same system? Like, if you're gonna be making them like 1 point difference, what's the difference between that and just using point buy? There really isn't. So,
But that's the
just use
thing.
the
It's
ones
more
that don't.
random, and it actually adds more to it. And that's the thing, though.
It doesn't add more to
But
it.
here's the thing, Michael. It is because point buy you have very limited on what you get. Like you have stuff, but there's only so many combinations. With rolling, you can do essentially not whatever you want. But my point is like, it's a baseline, and you kind of can be whatever. Like obviously, if it's way too good or way too bad, you're probably gonna change it. But
Yeah, but if you're going to be changing it, then you might as well just use point buy anyways, because you're going to be going to the more balanced stats, and it's more balanced point buy.
it's like saying
But that's my
instead of
point, it
getting
doesn't need to be.
27 points in point buy, it's like, here, you can have a D8 plus 22 points. Like, it's a bit of randomness, but it barely changes anything. If you're going for balance,
but that's like
yeah, it's like, why even roll if you're just going to change the stats anyways?
Yeah.
But that's my okay. You guys I'm not saying change them drastically. I'm just saying like, oh, you have a little high numbers. Let's lower like one stat by
Yeah,
2.
but if you're going to be having a little high numbers, then you're making them more balanced, and then you're back at where point buy is better again.
All right. I feel like this conversation is kind of going back and forth,
Yeah, no,
not really moving it forward. So
just really quick.
Unearthed Arcana, listen.
No, we really don't have. I'll be honest, I don't have time for another topic. But also,
no, I just wanted to bring up one last point in this topic.
well, I had something to say really quick.
Oh, sure.
The thing I like about rolling is not the unbalanced, because again, I like Andrew saying we're like we all roll and we all have we all roll, we can all choose because it's balanced. I don't like rolling because it's unbalanced or anything. I just like to have that extra. You don't always know exactly where you're gonna get, and that's okay. And that also kind of makes it more realistic. When you're in real life, you don't get born and you're like, I'm gonna have this much No. You
Also,
get that.
but,
You can train
but
for
in real
it.
life, if you get hit by a fireball, you
Michael.
die. You don't.
Also,
Michael-
D&D is
Michael.
fun, and real life is so fair it hurts. Right? Like,
Yes, okay.
If you're looking to have fun,
But-
you choose your stats. If you're looking for so fair it hurts, you can be born without legs or something.
Yes,
Okay.
my point, however, is that it makes it like I don't know. I just feel like it adds a little more, not necessarily challenge, but it adds something more to character creation. If character creation is always point buy, you're always going to have the same number of things. You're always going to do. It's just going to be the same. You're going to make a character. The character may be different every time, but the creation's the same. By rolling, you have that bit of extra
the
stuff.
rolling's
There
the
might be
same,
something
though.
different. Yeah, rolling's also the
Rolling's
same,
the
but you're not going to get the same values out of it each time, and you're not always going to have.
You get different values with point buy though.
No, you really don't. You have the exact same number of values.
Well, you can put those numbers however you like.
Yeah, but
So if
you
Not
can
everyone
also
using
with
standard
rolling.
bread.
You can do that with rolling too, though.
If
You have
want
6
the
numbers, and you can
randomness-
put them wherever.
If you want the randomness of rolling, but you also want the balance, then you just have one player roll for everybody's stats. And if they're underpowered, everybody's underpowered together, you're all happy. If it's overpowered, everybody's overpowered together, you're all happy. It's random, it's the luck of the draw, but when it comes down to it, nobody's going to be unhappy because you can't complain when everybody has the exact same numbers.
Exactly, and that's my point. You don't have to, just because you want balance does not mean you have to have the exact same points every time. It does not have to be point by every time. Just because rolling does not inherently.
I would be rather having the choice to pick my own numbers and have to rely off some
And that's my
shitty
point.
numbers that
No, Michael.
other people have to use, which is why point buy is better.
No, exactly. But Michael, here's my thing. You're right. You have a preference. That does not make one better than the other. There are certain people that like one, certain people that like others. They have different areas where they're good and different areas where they're bad. They have upsides and downs. There's not one that is better and one
There's
that is
not
worse.
really a downside though.
That actually transitioned us into an interesting point what you just brought up there, Jonah, about certain ones being better or worse. Not just like opinion-wise, but also numerically. Because I think, as a lot of us know, technically rolling for stats with like the 4d6, remove the lowest, technically on average gives you higher stats than point buy. Which brings us to the classic conundrum of players wanting to choose point buy or rolling, not because they think it's a better system or all the great reasons you all just brought up, but because they want stronger characters.
And in that case,
If you want an overpowered campaign, ask your DM.
that's
yeah,
true.
if you want, that's my opinion. Like, if you want, instead of trying like the work around, like, oh, I'm doing this, I want to roll stats because I think the randomness is like real fun. When in reality, you just want a stronger character.
That's
I think just
dumb.
being open and being like, hey, can we do a more overpowered campaign? I think that'd give you a
If you
much
want
better
it,
result.
if you're rolling for stats because you want higher stats, then you should just use point buy but add points.
Yeah, like I feel like
'Cause
because oftentimes
if
I've
you-
heard many a horror story from DMs who like go to the new groups like, oh yeah, we want to do like if we do like 46 reroll ones, we can get like a powerful character. And it's like, whoa, okay, that's a bit much. That was for rolling. I was more thinking like something like 3d6, and something it's like, oh no, we should use point buy then. Point buy is way more balanced. Like that's an anecdote from Puff and Forest, but still,
Yeah.
like
yeah, you can. That's my point. I feel like I like rolling because I don't care much about my stats. It could be whatever. I don't want to have to take time to think about what I want as stats. I want to roll, be like, okay, these are the numbers I get. I want to put them here, here, and here. I don't want to have to take the time to be like, I put a point here. I put a point here. I just want to roll dice. There. Those are my stats. Done. That's why I like rolling, because I don't care enough.
You balance them anyway, so you obviously do care what they are.
No, I don't balance them. Either the DM balances them or someone else picks for me. I don't do anything. Someone else balances them. That's my point. I just want stats on the
He's
page to
saying
play
he's
with.
leaving it up to chance for like his general numbers, but he's also leaving it open for the DM or the rules of the character creation to intervene to make it more fair.
Exactly.
Because to be fair, point buy does take more it takes brain power that rolling for stats doesn't take.
I am not a good decision maker when it comes to characters in general.
When it comes to point buy, you're doing more for your character, though. You're designing it more to what you want it to
Michael,
be.
but that's the thing. You don't need to do point buy to do that. I take hours just thinking of a name for a character. But if I have stats on the board and I'm like, all right, these are my stats, I can rearrange them however I want. And if I think they're underpowered or overpowered, I will tell the DM and ask him if he wants me to change them.
Yeah,
but these are my stats, and I can do whatever I want with them. And I don't have to think meticulously about, do I put a stat here or here? Do I do this or this? Like, I just don't have to choose. It's there for me to use. I don't have to take an hour thinking about how exactly I want my stats to be. I just have stats and I have to figure out where I want to put them.
I don't think that much about point buy. I just use my points and say what categories I think my character should have it.
Michael, and that's my point.
Really
Michael, and that's my point. You don't do that, and I do. So it is a preference thing. One is not better than the other. It is just simply what people prefer. I prefer rolling. You prefer point buy.
Jonah, you are wrong.
You're right. My opinion's wrong.
Your opinion is wrong.
Jonah, you have diabetes. I don't even want to hear it anymore.
Get pranked.
Jonah,
I will give you diabetes. I'll walk over to your house and cough on you. Oh, I can't say that because of Corona. Shoot.
Don't do it.
Okay, give him a lot more than that, probably.
I will high five you and therefore transfer my diabetes.
You'll make me roll for stats.
Okay, I have like 5 minutes, so we need an outro.
All right. So, okay. So, in conclusion, after Bang, we seem to have come to some decent, kind of agree to disagree. Seem to be the overall message of this podcast.
I don't agree to disagree. He's wrong.
That's called agreeing to disagree, Michael.
Yeah, I'm afraid you kind of just proved the point.
No, I don't agree to that.
I'm just gonna mute Michael.
I'm just gonna mentally mute him. So our conclusions for our main talking points is in terms of the simplicity of 5e character creation, it can be both a good and a bad thing. You can make characters it's a lot easier to make characters, and you can have some certainly more unique aspects, but there are other editions like 3.5 which can offer more like numerical uniqueness and like variety in how your character acts. So yeah, it can really, again, it kind of just comes down to personal preference, which will be the memo again for this session. As for punishing people for certain choices in characters, we seem to be in an agreement that usually is kind of, well, it can be a bad thing with like characters who are basically limited in what classes they take. It can actually add to them. Again, like the half-orc wizard, their intelligence may be low, but they push through the odds to still become a decent wizard. which can make for some fun character moments, but at the same time, it can seem quite limiting to your players. Multiclassing. Ooh boy, multiclassing. It can be fun and have some unique moments, but you shouldn't make a character just for the sole purpose of multiclassing, aka to power game. That's not really what D&D is about, and if you are for that, you should probably find a group that is a-okay with that. So if you do want a multi-class, it should probably take quite an effort and should have very solid story reasons that you and your DM work towards. And last but not least, in terms of point buy versus rolling for stat, it seems to really come down to personal preference. Point buy is a much more controlled way of getting everyone to get the stats, but rolling can give some uniqueness and randomness to stats, which can be fun, but could also leave some players feeling like they were left behind just through sheer chance, or like they have suddenly become gods after they got like 418s. So does that sound good to everyone here?
That makes sense.
I will.
Now, time to discuss alignment.
No.
Oh, that might be.
Prepare for alignment in our next video.
Yeah, that will be fun. That was sarcasm, by the way. Oh,
No,
anyways. Kind of wasn't. But anyways, once again, if you have stuck with us so long, you have our deepest gratitude. We don't know why you spent an hour and a half.
Donate to our patron.
Idiots talk about their D&D opinions, but we really thank you for doing so. And we hope you'll rejoin us for our next podcast, which it sounds like will be all about alignment. Thank you.